Hello, everyone, and welcome to the continuation of the Luso-American Education Foundation Conference. It is the 47th conference of the Luso-American Education Foundation, which began 47 years ago as a conference for bilingual education teachers. At the time, there were quite a few immigrants still coming from the archipelago of the Azores. Bilingual education was still a product in California schools about almost 50 years ago now, and the need for this conference began under the auspices of the Luso-American Education Foundation. For the last 4 years, so since the pandemic hit, we've been online, and it's a format that Luso-America Education Foundation wants to continue. And it's put forth with, hosted by PBBI, as all of you know, the Portuguese Beyond Borders Institute from California State University, Fresno, from good old Fresno State. Go Bulldogs. And so welcome to each and every one of you. This is a great panel. They all have been, and they all will be. But I can say this at my age, if I tick people off, it's okay, which is this is one of my favorites, and because of the literary component. And I am a fan of these four writers and poets here on this panel, as all of you know, I believe. So welcome to all four of you. Thank you so much for joining us. The title of the conference, as all of you know, is with Carnations in September, with a question mark. And it comes a little bit from the legend of the roses of the Queen and her husband, Don Dinis, when he asked her what she had in her cloak, and she said roses, and of course the famous line, roses in January. And so we're kind of doing the same thing, Carnations in September, as we kind of bridge together tradition and innovation. And so I'm going to ask each and every one of our four poets and writers here to take a couple of minutes, 2, 3, 4 minutes, and give a little bit of a bio of themselves. And we'll start with Diana, and we'll move our way across. So no particular order. We'll just go back and forth. I'm not very disciplined when it comes to these things, but I will not forget anyone, of course.
All right, well, I'll kick it off. Hey, everybody. My name is Diana Firestone. I am a first-generation Portuguese-American, and I teach English courses between high school and college classes right now. And I also coach instructors on the nature of working with first-gen students. So a lot of my work happens to be around this subject, and a lot of my writing sort of hits in the same vein as well. I write a lot about what it's like to be a first-generation American, and the idea of living in two different worlds constantly. So a lot of my work stems from that. And I look forward to continuing writing and working with students who are trying to struggle with the same concepts with their own education right now.
Indeed, we here at Fresno State, we were just told not too long ago, we were able to reach a milestone, being like number 8 in the nation in mobility, as far as ranked as a university, because almost 70% of our students are the first in their family, not necessarily first generation, but first in their family to attend college. And that's a huge undertaking, but that also changes generations. So kudos for what you do. And of course, we'll continue reading everything that you publish, Diana. Thank you all. Thank you so much. So Anthony Barcelos.
Thank you, Dinesh. All 4 of my grandparents were born on the island of Terceira in the Azores, including my father, who was also born there and came over as a young child when my grandparents immigrated in the 20s and moved to California and started a dairy farm that grew quite successfully, and today is maintained by my brother Tom, who is the owner and operator of the Barcelos farms down in Central California. I grew up speaking Portuguese. I was in an Azorean bubble all of my life until I went to kindergarten, and I discovered that everyone was speaking cartoon language, because it was the language I saw on Saturday morning cartoons. It wasn't the language we used at home. I'm a math teacher. I'm the senior professor in mathematics at American River College in Sacramento, where I've been for a long time, since 1987. And I became a writer sort of accidentally. I have some experience in journalism. I've written textbooks and supplements in mathematics. And then about 15 years ago, I got the bug to document and in fact celebrate the accomplishments of my Barcelos grandparents in uprooting the family and reestablishing themselves successfully in California, as well as some of the trials and tribulations that come about with the change in generations and the disputes over the heritage, which in our case included a major dairy farm and acreage and cattle and all sorts of things. It was a difficult business, and I fictionalized it, and quite a few people thought it was entertaining and worthwhile. So that's why I'm here in the midst of these literary lights. I am not worthy, but I'm glad to be here.
Oh, yes, you are worthy. Land of milk and money. Don't forget that, those of you watching. And Millicent Borgicardi.
Hi, happy to be here. Let's see. I am Portuguese-American, and I think it's second generation. My father grew up speaking Portuguese, much like Anthony Barcelos, until he was in school, because he had to translate for his maternal grandmother and his maternal aunt, great aunt, who he was raised by. So he was bilingual, and unfortunately, I was not raised that way. They wanted me to speak English. So I have been spending many times on Duolingo, and I'm really trying. I work every day. I did some classes in Porto, and then I go every day. Last 4 years, I have a perfect streak on Duolingo, and I'm really trying hard. So my background is I've taught at the college level at Cal State Long Beach and Long Beach City. I was raised in Long Beach, and I do a lot of freelance writing now and writing workshops. I have 4 poetry books. Most recent one is Quarantine Highway, which got an honorable mention at the Latino Book Awards. And before that, it was Through a Grainy Landscape, which is my sort of Portuguese poetry collection, which I'm very proud of. I also do interviews with Portuguese and Portuguese-American artists and writers for various journals, the Portuguese-American Journal being the main one. I've written maybe 50 or 60. And I organize a couple of reading series. One of them is Kale Soup for the Soul. And I think that's it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Millicent. And Kale Soup for the Soul will have a presentation this semester at PBBI. Millicent and I have worked on that. Thank you, Millicent, for your work. It'll be, I believe, in October, if I'm not mistaken. And so we'll come up, we'll give you the date. And Millicent, by the way, has promised me that she's going to work on her interviews, and hopefully one of these days we will have what needs to be done, because it is great work that she does with those interviews, and we need to publish a book. And hopefully we can get a publisher, in Portugal that could be published, of course, in English, or interviews are in English. But I think it's a history of the Portuguese-American arts, and much needed for a lot of our college courses as we now go into ethnic studies. Thank you, Millicent. And my good friends, all good friends, but the Master Sam Pereira, who is coming to us from the wonderful city of Los Banos, that has produced Sam Pereira and of course Alfred Lewis and many other giants in the Portuguese, not just literary world, but the communication world. Just recently passed away Miguel Canticastro, a man who had the longest running Portuguese radio program in the United States, in North America, actually, 72 years on the radio. Sam, welcome.
Thank you, Dinesh. Yes, I used to listen to Miguel on my grandmother's radio and my aunt's radios, and not so much my father's, but he was sort of an opening link to, or a tie to, my connection with the Azores and with Portugal. Like others here have said, I grew up not learning Portuguese. So it was something that just wasn't, I mean, my father's family spoke it to each other, but it just wasn't encouraged, and I wish it had been. My background is I went to Fresno State as an undergraduate, received my bachelor's degree there and my teaching credential there. I went on to the University of Iowa Writers Workshop, where I got an MFA in poetry and creative writing, something that was very difficult to convince my father, especially, the importance of having. And, he was right, but it was something I had to do, and I don't regret it for a minute. Let's see. Beyond that, I've been lucky enough to have published a total of 7 books, the most recent one being True North and Untrue You. And that was published by 9 Mile Press in New York. Sadly, the publisher of that press recently passed away. So that was a major loss. He was an old friend who I had known for like 50 years, Bob Hurds. But we go on, and we'll go on here. That's about all I got. Thank you.
And thank you, Sam. Enjoying retirement, I know, and writing, and if you are Sam's friend on Facebook, also some of the poetry that he also puts on a regular basis, as well as some of his very pertinent commentary about the everyday situation in the United States of America, sometimes the political world, which, of course, surprises all of us on a daily basis.
Sometimes I should just be quiet. Yeah.
Let's before we have, which is of course will be the highlight of this, which is all of you reading your work. Let's talk a little bit about exactly what Sam just talked about when he published through, of course, friends of his, a publisher in New York. Publishing in the Portuguese-American community is not easy. Publishing in general is not easy in the United States unless sometimes you have the right connections. But publishing in the Portuguese-American community, and especially distribution, that is something that we've all had problems with. And I'm going to start with Millicent, because Millicent has done an outstanding job in promoting her books and other books as well. I think that one has to, because and also because Millicent, so tell us a little bit what your thoughts are, first of all, on the publishing world and what can be done, or any ideas that we could do as a group to bring the Portuguese-American authors into a different forefront in our presentations. I've asked groups all across the state to, when they have a festa, to feature a book. I don't care which book it is, just one book. Every year a different book. We have 85 festas, so that would be 85 different books that we'd be featuring. That would not be bad at all. But I think there are some things, in the popular world that can combine with the literary world. So I know that you work very hard at this, Millicent, and I also know that you have also worked with the Hispanic community, and I've thought for years that may be the way, for us to get a bigger share of a reading audience, because there's a lot of issues that we connect, the same as Diana mentioned, with first-gen students. That and it's the same thing for all of us, whether we come from Portugal, the Azores, or we come from Colombia, or we come from Brazil, or some of the Latin American countries. So Millicent, your thoughts on publishing and reaching the Portuguese-American world, because after all, we are, according to the census, just about 1.5 million. If only about 20% of those read your books, that'd be great. I mean, you'd be publishing 300,000 plus. So, Millicent, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's constantly, not just in the Portuguese community, but in the writing community in general. It's a struggle to get the word out with books. And when you broached the topic for the panel, I made a little short list. I think that generally speaking, I think it would be really great if we could get the word out within our community and also outside the community. Part of what I was doing with the Kale Soup is giving readings in the Portuguese communities at libraries and universities that had Portuguese studies, but also in general audiences. Like at the AWP Writers Conference, we had a few panels and we did some readings. And so there has to be a bridge between us and Portugal and the Azores, and also us between the general population. So, you know, I gave it a lot of thought. I can kind of read my little notes here. I think it's really important to join with MFA programs, general MFA programs. We're not really making that connection now. I know I visit classrooms, MFA classrooms, and I've taught graduate writing courses, but we're just not really breaking that ceiling. And a lot of the schools where we have Portuguese studies programs, there are also fantastic MFA programs. And I think that that would be a really good connection to get into. Instead of reading at only Portuguese studies programs, we could maybe start breaking into some MFA programs as well. This is one of my religious beliefs, libraries. And I think that we should do whatever we can do to get our Portuguese-American books purchased by and shelved at libraries in Portuguese communities and libraries at universities where Portuguese studies are presented. So I try to get people, if they're working at a university or if they're living in a community that has a library where there's a large Portuguese population, try and get a section and try and get the libraries to order the books. I think that's something we can do that's actually free. You just talk to friends and you send out emails and we try and get the books in libraries, which is accessible and people don't have to buy anything except the libraries, and a lot of them have funding for that already. Another key element getting it out into the general public is getting books reviewed by non-Portuguese critics. We do really well within our community. We have a lot of people. I mean, I know I do reviews and interviews. Other people do is we have just great resources here. But to get people that are outside of that community to review a Portuguese book that's not necessarily a bestseller, that's not going to make Publishers Weekly, that kind of thing, I think it's really, we need to sort of expand to that a little bit. And another thing I put is workshops, writing workshops. I think that the Beyond Institute, I think it would be a really nice component to have some, maybe even Zoom writing workshops, and you bring in high school and community college students and do like a little short thing with prompts, and we can sort of rotate different authors and do things that are sort of centric to Portuguese culture. We could do at Rhode Island College. We did the Kale Soup group. We did a series of writing workshops with prompts, and it was we titled it "A Poetry of Place." And we had them writing about Portuguese community in Provincetown, and so we could do something like that with Fresno, or we could do it with San Jose. And I mean, I think I sent it to you, Denise, but I have a little PowerPoint about poetry of place, and you do examples from writing by Sam and Frank Gaspar and Catherine Vosch, and then you get students writing about their place in the world. Okay, and then lastly, because I don't want to take up too much time, lastly, I think we really need to focus on 90% of our promotion after the book is published. We really, really need to. It's like when someone gets a book published, there needs to be a book launch in maybe 5 or 6 different cities. And then readings and signings at book festivals, at writers' conferences. So I always like to think, I feel like a lot of my effort into getting a book out, but then the real work starts once it's published. And I think a lot of us really have to drag our feet and really work harder at that. But like, when a book comes out, it should have at least 10 or 20 readings associated with it. And that would really help us get out into the community. So thanks, Denise. I hope I didn't talk too long.
Oh, no. Those are some excellent ideas. And the workshop idea, I will put that in place. I'll guarantee you I'll get some funding somewhere. I'll find a farmer somewhere that likes to read. Most of them actually do like to read. A lot of our farmers, Portuguese Americans. Sam. your thoughts on how do we promote, what do we do? I mean, we have such fine writers, and then it's sort of like my old poli-sci teacher from when I mean old, he's very old because he would have been over 100, he's passed, but in my college days, I was impressed, really, to be honest with you. He asked me when I introduced myself, when he was looking at the class roster, he said, is it Borges or is it Borges? And I said, "Ooh, I'm impressed. You know the difference." And he said, "I do. Portuguese or Spanish?" I said, "Portuguese." And he said, "You guys kind of discovered the world, but you failed to tell anybody about it." I'll never forget this, because it was, sometimes we have these awesome writers, but no one else knows about it. Your thoughts, Sam?
Well, I don't have very much. I was extremely impressed with what Millicent was saying. I think I have to plead guilty to all those things that she was talking about us having to do, because I've not been a good promoter of the books that I've published. I've gotten a little better with the last couple, but it's very difficult. And to put a little negativity into it, because that's what I do, the library thing is a great idea. Personally, I haven't had a lot of luck with libraries. I gave a reading in Merced once. I gave the librarian copies of the books. They swore they were going to put them in the library, and I have yet to see them anywhere on that library's list. The local library is supposed to have at least one of my books, but got me. I don't know if it's there or not. And a lot of that is my not following through, I suppose, but I have kind of a negative sense for some of that stuff. The idea of getting, what am I trying to say? Reviews by people not connected in some way to the Portuguese community to review your book is great. Send me somebody from the New Yorker. But I don't know.
We
I'm
can't
not going
promise you, but
say
we
anything
will
more
try.
about this. I'm at a loss, quite frankly, to come up with something
Sure.
positive here.
Sure, but as you said, libraries are excellent, and I think more reading opportunities, even within the Portuguese American community, there aren't a lot of opportunities, and sometimes there's some new things popping up right now, as all of you know. A heritage celebration coming up in Pismo Beach on the 14th, and I mean, literally during those times, there's thousands and thousands of people at the coast, and so hopefully we're going to be there, PBBI, and hopefully people will start seeing. I know that the Portuguese Heritage Publication tried, being present at some of the festas, and it didn't work out in the past as well as they thought it would. But I think that times are not the same as they were also 20 years ago. Diana, your thoughts on how does all of your work become even more easily available to everyone? Of course, published and then of course read.
Yeah, way to ask a loaded question today, Dinesh. But no, I mean, I've been thinking about this, especially since you sent out some of those topics to us, but it's been on my mind because I've noticed that a lot of our outreach, let me back up. So I think part of the thing that I've been working on as a writer and a teacher is creating a sense of identity and how to celebrate different identities in our writing. And I know that's a theme that we explore obviously with this program, but I love Millicent's idea of getting into libraries and getting at the anthology that just came out. It would be great if some of those works were incorporated into curriculum, but not just at the college level, even earlier, like in high school. A lot of the literature that we're reading to kids doesn't have a lot of diversity in it already, but if we could get on committees or promote in that way, I think that would be incredibly helpful because it instills that sense of identity earlier on. in students, so they feel more confident. I think one of the interesting and weird things that came out of growing up as a first gen, especially Azorean, is that a lot of our heritage tends to be isolated and stuck. And it's come up in conversation with my family, like with my husband, of course. And, you know, when our families immigrated here in the 50s and then 70s again, it's like our culture gets stopped and paused. And so a lot of the younger groups don't tend to identify with that same culture. Like when I go back to Portugal or the Azores, when I go back to Piku, it's different. Everyone's got it's a whole different culture, even though it's the same island. It's just the culture that I experienced was trapped 30, 50 years ago. And so finding a way to bridge that gap between old and new could be a good solution. And I've noticed a lot of people, like in conversations that I've had, it's all through social media. I'm finding a lot more groups in the Latina community that are supporting each other and being more niche down and specific about who they are reaching out to and who they're supporting and how they're supporting them. And I haven't found a lot of Portuguese communities out there. I think maybe 2, and that might include this one at this point, that are visible online. And so if we can create some visibility and reach younger people, I think we have a chance of creating more writers, creating more voices, and tell those stories, because we have a rich culture. We just don't share it as much with everyone. So yeah, I know that's kind of encircling my brain this week.
Sure. And that's a great thought. And I think that maybe through PBBI, we can make an effort also to reach the community schools, right? Where I think about 12 Portuguese language community and heritage schools, you know, they're and why not have one of you read, you know, like through Zoom to the students who are, 10, 11, 12 years old, and are learning, Portuguese, but, they're also learning about the culture. And I think that we do have to make an effort to the community schools and the high schools. And that is actually one of my plans. I'd love to get the high school teachers in California. There's only 14 of them. And I was one of them until 6 years ago. And but there's still the 14 left. And get us and develop what you mentioned, and also Millicent and also Sam alluded to, a curriculum within those classes that involves the Portuguese-American experience a bit more than just teaching, how to conjugate a verb or how to say on the that kind of stuff. Yeah, a little bit more of identity through creative writing, indeed. Yeah,
we do this a lot with, I've seen a lot of this with other cultures in writing as well, in terms of like creative writing courses. But there is still a lot of curriculum at least in California, that doesn't have a lot of diversity in their standardized textbooks. So finding ways to get in there and be seen and be heard, and also create a space for people who were like me, who didn't have that form of identity earlier on, or pushed it aside, like Millicent, like learn English first. We spoke Portuguese at home and then learned Spanish and then English, and then found a gobbledygook of mix in between. But to be able to be confident in the fact that we could learn both languages, or 3, or whatever we've got in our families, but feel confident, and that's a part of our identity, and not ashamed of knowing another language or hiding it from the world, is an important part too.
Indeed. And in today's world, it's a bit different than what it was when I got here in the 1960s, and even my friends that came in the 1970s, at that time you almost had to hide it. Anthony, how do we get everybody to read Land of Milk and Money and and all of the other, of course, works? I've always thought that your book would be a great piece to adapt to a play on the Portuguese-American experience, because you have some great dialogues in there. Your thoughts?
One of the first things you need to do is have a friend like Denise Borges who promotes you at every opportunity. That's extremely important. But the theme of friends within the community and without the community is quite important. Within the community, you naturally have allies who want your works to prosper. And I have been exceedingly fortunate in that when I had a manuscript as a completely unknown writer, Rinaldo Silva at the university in Aveiro looked over my description of what I had done. He wrote the book about the Portuguese-American novel. So I thought I should ask him what opportunities there might be. And he was the person who sent me to Tegas Press at the University of Massachusetts. And the downside, of course, is that Tegas Press is a niche publisher. And when you have a niche university press publish your novel, you don't get reviewed in major journals or magazines. I got a review, a short one, in the Sacramento Bee because I hand carried a copy of my novel to the book reviewer there. I was not successful at the San Francisco Chronicle, though I did get a book reading in San Francisco at Books Incorporated at Opera Plaza, which Nuno attended when he was the Consul General of Portugal. So that's within the community. You're getting support from other people who appreciate Portuguese culture. But as many stops as I made trying to promote the book in Sacramento, in Turlock, in Tulare, in Porterville, and a couple of stops in Massachusetts, in North Dartmouth, and also in Lowell, you're always kind of within the community. And I value the support I get from friends like Ronaldo. And as it happens, I'm also friends with Humberto Freitas, because in our childhood, we were classmates in 8th grade, and I was his translator because he didn't speak English at that time. So having a literary figure like Humberto Freitas as an advocate is a great advantage, a great benefit within the community. Breaking out of the community and getting outside. I think Millicent has the right idea with libraries and MFA programs. Not having much experience in the field, I can't add much significant to what the others have said.
Thank you all. And we actually right now we have two young ladies. Sam has participated as a reader in our MFA program in our here a couple of years ago. We were in the middle of the pandemic, couldn't go anywhere, but that was an excellent reading program, as you might recall. Melinda, I think, and Kaylee Camara, who is actually completing, I think she completes it this year, and Melissa Jessen-Heiser. So we all every single year seems like we have one Portuguese, at least in our MFA program at Fresno State, and we have had one for the last at least 6-7 years. So we have about 5 alumni so far. So it'd be great. That's a good idea, great idea. I agree, Anthony, Millicent. Thanks, because I think that we need to establish those bridges. So let's go to the good stuff, which is your creativity. So this was nuts and bolts, but I think we got some ideas, and I think we do. And I would call out to the Portuguese organizations, to buy the book. To buy your books and to have a book fair and maybe for a Christmas gift or some other kind of holiday gift that you want to give somebody in the board something, why not give a collection of 5 or 6 Portuguese books in poetry and in fiction and nonfiction. I think we all need to do that a little bit more, because sometimes that's how we get to other folks. And really quick, I'm teaching an Azorean class in English, lit and poetry in English, and a little bit of history as well, and some foods and some of the good things, that to make them want to read the poetry, of course. And that is, and we're using the anthology, but I have 12 kids who are not. I have 25. It's a full class. I have 12 students who have nothing to do with Portuguese. I mean, they're nothing. There's no relation. There's nothing. And the first assignment was to tell me, why are you taking this class? And I understood from the other 13, but the 12, believe it or not, the majority of them said this: I have a friend who lives down the street who's Portuguese. I want to learn a little bit more about that culture. I see the Portuguese festas at the hall at CPDS. I've never understood them. I'd like to know a little bit more about them. So there's curiosity out there outside of our community. We just need to find ways to reach them. Millicent, we'll start with you. What are you going to share with us from your literary world, from your awesome literary creativity.
Okay, I picked a short one. You'll have to bear with me. I gotta open up in Word.
Oh, that's okay. That's fine.
Okay. It's called How to Shake Off the Policija Suragasa Publica, circa 1970. Walk home determined, neither urgent nor slow. Make clear-cut turns and hold your head up. Carry a briefcase. Dress in shades of brown, as if you could fold up and turn back into if you need to. Do not stop except to honor streetlights. Stay in the shadows, but do not stay tight to the building overhangs. Do not pause to peer into windows or look as if you are waiting for someone like Salazar. Disappear, disappear, disappear as best as you can into traffic, into the pulse of Lisboa. Do not hesitate when the men draw closer. Turn into the nearest side street that is dimly lighted. Find a lobby where people are entering easily. Go up the stairs as if you have business there, or as if this is your home, which it isn't. Do not look back, even cautiously, at the PSP. Glance down, step with surety into the unfamiliar territory. Find the side stairs, sit under the darkness until you have become the earth. Hold your breath until the men have gone by. Tell yourself you are safe and everything is fine. Remain curled up longer than you think you have to, longer than you imagine might be absolutely necessary.
Lovely, beautiful, powerful, very powerful. Thank you, Millicent. From Millicent, we'll how about we go to a prose before we go to a poet? Anthony, unless you have a poem for us, unless you're going to surprise us with a poem.
Oh, that would be a terrible surprise. Since my mother made a comment in the documentary about festas, about encountering my father at a festa in Southern California, I'm going to read part of the chapter called Boys Meet Girls in the novel Land of Milk and Money. To set the scene, it's simply a matter of the Francisco boys, brothers, going down from the Central Valley to a Southern California festa and encountering a pair of sisters and one of their school chums. And we'll just pick it up from there. Hey, who are those guys? Carmina had spotted the Francisco boys, who were somewhat ill at ease, standing together and looking at the strangers surrounding them. Odette saw an opportunity to play matchmaker to her sister and their school chum, Carmina. I don't know, Carmina. They're rather cute, though. Why don't you and Odile go over and talk to them? I'm sure they're from out of town. You should welcome them. Well, maybe. What do you think, Odile? Want to do it? I guess that would be okay. I'll go if you go. Odette tried to fine-tune the approach. Odile, you should talk to the one on the right. I think he's your type. Odette carefully avoided describing Paulino as the shorter brother. That would have gotten her sister's back up. The taller boy looks kind of sad, said Carmina, dragging out into the open the height issue that Odette had been at pains to avoid. You could cheer him up, Carmina. I know you could. You should set your cap for him, suggested Odette. But Carmina isn't wearing a cap, observed Odile in confusion. Odette kept the exasperation out of her expression. It's just a figure of speech, she replied. I read it and Gone with the Wind. Odette disengaged her arm from Carmina's hand and nudged her friend and her sister toward the Francisco boys. Now, go be nice to them. Make them feel welcome. It's the polite thing to do. Go. The girls giggled at each other as they moved tentatively toward the brothers. Paulino noticed their movement. Candy, it looks like we have visitors. Candido glanced in the direction his brother was looking. Carmina knew right away that she preferred the shorter and younger Francisco boy. She figured they were brothers from their resemblance to each other, although the taller and older one had a high forehead that exaggerated his age and a long face that gave him a perpetually mournful aspect. The younger one, by contrast, looked bright-eyed and cheerful. He had a nice smile, and his wavy hair was a shade darker than his brother's. She hesitated, though. Odette had made it very clear that the prettier boy was marked out for her sister, leaving the homelier one for Carmina. Did she want to cut in on Odile and get on Odette's wrong side? Would it be better to let Odile have first crack at the cute one? The moment she asked herself the question, Carmina had her answer. Let Odile go first. She was sure to mess it up. Carmina felt just a little guilty relying on her schoolmate's clumsiness, but it would be better than actively undermining her. Hi, said Odile. Hello, replied the Francisco simultaneously. Hello, replied Carmina. A long moment of awkward silence. My sister said she thought you were from out of town, said Odile, trying desperately to make conversation. She looked back over her shoulder as if to point out her sister, but Odette had vanished. Your sister is right, said Paulino. Candy and I came down from Tulare County for the day. So what do you and your brother do in Tulare County? Asked Carmina. As if you didn't know, laughed Paulino as he and his brother exchanged amused glances. Carmina laughed. I'm sorry, but I was just trying to make conversation. All of them laughed again except for Odile. Candido noticed the confused expression on her face and felt a pang of sympathy. Paulino was always laughing at things he didn't get, and it looked like Odile suffered the same fate with her friend. What's wrong, Odile? I don't understand. Your brother, she didn't remember Paulino's name, said as if you don't know, but I don't know. What did he mean? Candido smiled at her, the first happy expression anyone had seen on his face that morning. Well, if you think about it a little more, we're Portuguese boys at a festa. What do you think we do for a living? What does your father do for a living? What does Carmina's father do for a living? Odile wrinkled her brow with a challenging string of questions. Carmina's father has a dairy farm that he runs with her brothers. Do you have a dairy farm? Yes, you're right, exclaimed Candido. Doesn't every Portuguese boy in California live on a dairy farm? I think it might be the law. Odile looked concerned, but decided Candido was probably joking about the law. I guess you're right, she said, a smile appearing on her face. Carmina had been watching the exchange between Odile and Candido and was slightly startled to discover that Paulino had moved right next to her. There's a vendor over there with a soft drink concession. I'm getting a little thirsty and was wondering if you would like something to drink too, he said. Oh, yes. Yes, I am a little thirsty. That would be nice. Great. We can leave your friend here with Candy. They seem to be having a good conversation, and I don't want to interrupt them. Oh, okay. That's a good idea. Paulino and Carmina moved away slowly from Odile. Paulino was doing a good job of hiding his nervousness as he wondered if it would be too forward to offer his arm as he led Carmina over to the drinks concession. He decided not to risk it. He was happy enough that she was following him willingly where he wanted to go. Besides, if she took his arm, she might notice the hammer pounding of his heart, which was making his entire body vibrate.
Lovely, lovely. Very, very, very Azorean indeed. You know, it is the law. Yeah, you must live on a dairy farm if you're Portuguese, especially when arriving from there, and not and especially at one particular time zone. Thank you so much, Anthony. Sam.
Okay, I am going to read two poems. They're not very long. The first one is titled On Retiring from Poetry. It's not going to happen, but that's the title of the poem. So this will be his final day as messenger of cloud cover and avenger of the weak of heart. It's hard to believe the way he sees this happening. He goes out on a boat east of Maine and west of God, pure island fare, or what's left, where whitefish come to share their cloistered shanty 45s, hoisting madfish cocktails in the mix. They stare, expecting him to perform without the benefit of mic. The fish expect proprietary poetry, touched with greasy fork and spoon, of allegorical finesse, telling them, not today. He is retiring today from the brink and drink of words, and going home to pet his dog, likewise call a fish, and water, water, into the unforeseeable darkness, hand and chin and withered stump of what was once a man.
Magnificent. Thank you.
And lastly, I tend to bring in episodes with my friend Fernando Pessoa. I've written several poems, and I actually feel like I know the guy, which is strange. I don't know which one of us is crazier, or would have been. So this is called The Ocean Being Potable. There was the year I barely survived Fresno. I could tell you about it, but I won't. Or have I, during a devolution of self in my 7th book, where Pessoa and I hopscotched the scotches of Gettysburg, free will staring us in the face as the boats called from the harbor 2 hours away, and wanting to believe in the petroleum and rope of the past. Nothing made sense after that. Fernando and I regrouped after spinning the yarn out of control. Anyway, he started thumbing a ride back to New York and farther to Lisbon, maintaining at the same time an innocence mixed with desperation that could only mimic the sea. It was 1975, and I didn't see him again until it came to be the time of my death. Fernand carried a piano in from the cold. He poured a drink, and we sang some songs. Thanks.
Thank you, Sam. Magnificent, both of them. Thank you. Thank you. I think that you and Fernando share, and I'm glad you're incorporating him. And this is, of course, how we can use these poems as well, and all these writings in our to convey the essence of identity, as Diana was saying. And to,
I was just wondering which Pessoa Sam knew.
oh, of the different heteronyms. Yes, I mean, well, Pessoa had.
Oh yeah. I feel like I'm one of them.
But sometimes it is important. And as a matter of fact, before we turn to Diana real quick, one of my students actually wrote that of Azorean ancestry, he said, I'm looking forward to learning something about poetry and literature in this class, because it surprised me that Azorians even had literature or poetry, because I've always heard that nobody went to school in the Azores, which, it's not everybody didn't, but there was, a time that people didn't go beyond the 3rd grade. And obviously, that limited people. Diana.
Yeah, that's my parents' generation. That's in my lifetime that most of the people I know didn't go past 3rd grade. So we live in a different world because we're in education and because we write. It's a world that's difficult to share with our family. Like the work I have, it's difficult to explain and read to family because they don't understand, right? And so there's like that. Anyway, so I'll read this one. This one's called Ano sa Terra. And I'll surprise you with a short story this time instead of a poem. But this is one that's kind of in the same theme of what we were talking about today. All right, Ano sa Terra. Prova isto é bom. My grandpa always wanted us to try new things, even if we didn't know if we were going to like them. He hands me a single grape that no longer smells like a grape. In fact, it's a purple globe, but it's full of liquid. The skin is about to burst. I watch as he lifts his face to the sun, his straw hat stuck to his forehead by dried up sweat. He places 2 grapes in his mouth and then another. The popping sound resonates. His eyes squint and his lips pull back to show his teeth as if he was in pain. I let the grape roll around in my palm for a few seconds and then pick it up with 2 fingers gently. I tilt my head back just like my avô did and lift my hand into the air. My mom sees my hand in the air, laughs, and pushes it away. Oh, pai, ela não foi criada aqui. I stood there, mouth open, eyes closed until I heard my mom laugh again. My grandpa always tells me that I'm Portuguese, so why wasn't I allowed to try this? For many years, my mom protected me from anything that wasn't American. The visits to Piku started the year of my first birthday, and this summer I was 8 years old. By the time my mom was 8, she was allowed to have a glass of homemade wine right from here in the barrel. The next day, I wanted to try again. Mom and Grandma were upstairs cooking. I wandered downstairs to the wine cellar, where Avô was filling his white plastic wine jugs. His friend stood there, his green jeans torn at the knees, his shoes scuffed and covered in fine brown dirt. His plaid shirt is soaking in sweat and faded from the sun. He asked my grandpa if I was the American granddaughter. Avô straightened out his back after emptying the clear hose of wine and answered, Claro, mas ela é portuguesa. I could still hear my mom talking upstairs through the thin flooring above us. She couldn't hear me. So Avô reaches into the clear glass wine jug filled with little purple juice, and at the bottom, over 20 puffed out grapes bob a little every time he lifts it up. It had been tucked behind a giant wine barrel, so my grandmother couldn't find it. It looks filthy and even has a cobweb glued between the handle and the opening. How could he drink that, let alone take a sip out of something so dirty? He gives me the jug and a good swirl and scoops out another grape. Again, he says, Prova. The man standing there with us smiled. The side of his mouth lifts slightly more than the other, and I take the grape. This time I bite right into it, waiting for the sweet taste of September harvest. Instead, my entire face begins to pucker and my tongue locks in place, frozen with liquid fire burning on it. He tells me to swallow the liquid and then chew on the flesh of the grape. I could hear him say, maybe she is American. The other man laughs like my mom had earlier, so I did as I was told, and the burning stopped. I feel warm inside, a kind of heat that a tropical sun couldn't mimic. There's a curious tingling in my chest that I did not recognize, but I am learning to enjoy it today. And I ask for another. Toma cuidado, querida. São dois, mas picam. He says to me and hands me another one. The faces are contorted in laughter that looked like a grin of the horse as the lips pulled back and its big square teeth open to receive another treat. Avô bends down to cork the wine jugs and sends the man on his way. He tilts his hat, smiles, and reminds me that I still have to make it back up the stairs. Avô gives me the glass jug and lets me try to swirl it around a little bit. It is the size of 2 milk gallons combined. I hug it, clasping my fingers on the other side of it. My whole body swirls with a few of the drops splash up and out the top onto my face. It smells like sweet wine that my grandma makes, but a little stronger than grape juice. I let the jug slide down my legs to the floor and wipe the liquid off my face with my index finger. It is thicker than water, almost clear like it too, with only 1 drop on my finger. I taste it. It's not bitter, not sweet like the grape. It is hot, like rubbing alcohol, hot on an open wound, then cool as I take in a deep breath. He motions me to go upstairs and tucks the jug behind the barrels, then picks me up and places me on his shoulders and carries me up the steps.
What a great story.
Thanks. You're muted, Dinesh.
Sorry, I was going to say it is. I agree with Anthony, and I love all the Portuguese sound bites in there that identify those words. You know, sometimes people that can't even speak, which is not your case, but can't speak Portuguese. But everybody understands. As a matter of fact, you did in my classroom, I mentioned the word mais fica. Every single person Maishvika meant. Even fourth generation, they knew what Maishvika and bem feito, they also knew what that meant as well. So thank you for including that. I think it's wonderful to include those in there. So thank you all. And with that, we conclude our literary portion of the Luso-American Education Foundation. We have a lot of ideas. We heard some very, very fine writing. We hope all of you in the Portuguese-American community can, of course, those of you who are involved, especially in clubs and organizations, it's going to take a community effort. It is indeed, as was mentioned by our writers and poets, that we must break obviously into other readers and other folks who are of Portuguese, not Portuguese ancestry, but within our own community. We have the numbers. We have over 350,000 in California, and we have a very, very rich tradition of writing in the Azores. The Azores still today, with 250,000 people, has 5 daily newspapers, which is unbelievable. 5 daily newspapers plus 6 weeklies and I think half a dozen monthlies. There are still literary journals being published in the Azores. Letras Lavadas, which is the publisher we work with in Ponta Delgada, and their Nova Gráfica print shop, the Letras Lavadas, just them as an editor, last year published 58 books. 58 books in a region of 250,000. Obviously, they're not publishing thousands; they're publishing editions of 400 and 500, but they're publishing them, and so we have that tradition, and I'd love to see us carry it here because we have some fine creative writers, as we've seen here today. Again, thank you all for joining us. I appreciate it very, very much. I wish you the best, and we'll be in touch. Thank you all very, very much. And those of you following us, we'll be back in about 4 minutes with our next panel. Thank you.